You must have been.
PrymalChaos. Hey guys, PrymalChaos here. Welcome to the channel. This one today is going to be a little bit of an experiment. I'm going to be completely upfront here, as I always am. Whenever I've heard a song or, experienced something before, I'll always be upfront about it in reactions. I don't like to fake reactions. I think that that's something a lot of people do. And I know that amongst the reaction fan community, it's kind of one of the lowest things you can do. Because I think when people go into reactions, it's the authenticity that they really want. People like yourselves watching this, you want to vicariously, oh, there's another Tool reference. You want to vicariously re-experience the first time you've heard or experienced that sensation through somebody else, right? Because we all have that thing where we heard something for the first time and you always wish you could just forget it so you could hear it again for the first time. And that's why reaction videos are so ubiquitous, and it's why that they're so addictive, I think, for people, because they're chasing the dragon. They're trying to find that same feeling they had or witness it through someone else's eyes. Again, the first time that something really moved them. With all that being said, this song, I mean, I'm a big fan of Tool. I have been, for way too long. I've talked about this before. 10,000 Days as an album didn't grab me immediately when it came out. I think I bought it straight away. I might have just given it a cursory spin and, went back to listening to Enchroma, which was always the one I was kind of addicted to. Same thing happened with Lateralis as well. But I spent a lot of time waiting for the right time for the album to find me. That's the best way I can always describe it when I talk about Tool songs, is that they come to me when I'm ready for them. And that's why I always think that when you try to push Tool on somebody who may not be into them, it's like Sisyphus, you're trying to push the boulder up the hill. You can't make somebody like something that's as, complex, and something that may mean so much to you may not necessarily on the surface mean something to others, right? But anyway, I discovered sort of 10,000 Days, as far as my timeline goes, relatively recently, maybe in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. And The Pot is one of those songs that it's a standout for some reason. It just ticks boxes that sort of make it way more accessible and more interesting to the average person, right? Or to like the new listener, which is why there's thousands of YouTube reaction videos, and I've watched many myself, of people listening to The Pot for the first time, having no context of Tool, right? It's like, this is the gateway drug that'll get you into them. And so I was just clicking through YouTube and I found a video just, via the algorithm of somebody checking out, I think it was a classical musician listening to The Pot. And I'm like, oh, okay, I haven't watched one of these in a while. And I clicked on it. And in the first few bars, it occurred to me that I've heard this song a million times, but I've never listened to this song. Not in a critical capacity like I do when I do reaction videos. And in those first few bars, I noticed like 5 or 6 things that I just hadn't really taken any notice of before. And I thought, well, it's worthy of me doing it as an analysis, right? This isn't technically going to be a reaction because I've heard it, but I'll certainly be reacting to things that I hadn't noticed before, or intricacies or details. Because first of all, I've never heard the song on these headphones. These things are fantastic. Beyerdynamic, you can see it right there, 1990 Pros or something. Fantastic. I've never had any headphones quite this good. Not only that, the activity of critically listening to something as opposed to passively listening to it is not something I do when I'm just casually listening to music. So hopefully I'll have a lot of insight. Now, because I've heard this song a million times, I'm going to be picking apart little details, not the broad strokes things that you might have heard a million other reactors talk about. So there's going to be a lot of stopping and starting stuff. That's not your thing. Maybe this isn't the video for you, but hopefully together we can go on this journey and maybe pick out some things that even though you've heard the song 1,000 times, you may not have noticed, or you'll be sitting there going, my God, you're the other person who noticed this thing, and, we can find some camaraderie in that. So without further ado, let's jump right in. This is Tool, The Pot. There's only audio only on YouTube. So as far as I know, I don't think there's a music video for this. So here it is.
Who are you to?
Right off the bat. So first of all, there's the first thing you notice when you click play, if you listen to this, check this out, is just that ambient noise. Like it's like room noise from a microphone. Could be like a transformer or something in a mic preamp, or it could just be the desk. It could be anything, but that's some analog sounding shit right there. I'll play it again so you can hear it. Right there.
Who are you?
And then the other thing that I've noticed this before, but it's one of those things that it's blink if you miss it. is they've got the delay on Maynard's voice reversed. So you hear the delay of his voice before you hear him sing. So typically how a delay works is like an echo. You make a sound and then the processing system, whatever it might be, if it's outboard gear or if it's some sort of other plugin or something, will echo the sound. What you can do if you're clever though is you can mess around with that and you can sort of switch it so that in digital land, the echo is coming before the vocal. So if you listen real close here,
Who are you to wave your finger? You must have been out your head. I hold deep in mud.
God, I never realized how much analog warmth there is in this. Like you can hear it in Maynard's voice. It's like saturated just enough. You can hear these tiny, imperceivable little analog-y kind of clicks and pops that aren't really audible. It's more of like a texture in his voice. And when people talk about analog warmth, that's typically, I believe, what they mean is just that sort of, there's a lack of digital perfection. And I don't know how they recorded this album. I assume they used a lot of old school gear. But you know, even today, there's ways of emulating all of this, but there's something definitely authentic about this.
I hold deep
Ugh.
in muddy waters. You
And actually, it's funny. Just before the bass kicks in, you can hear that delay coming in before Maynard again.
I hold deep
Yeah.
in muddy waters. You practically raised the dead. Rob
Bass
the
playing's so
grave to
tight, man.
snow the cradle, then burn the evidence down. Soapbox house of cards and glass, so don't go tossing your stones around. You must have been.
Ugh.
You must have been.
Wow, I never really listened to that roll much before, but I really like that how it comes in like 3 waves. The way that this sort of branches out stereo-wise throughout that sort of intro build-up is really nice as well. Like if you listen, is it tablas or something? The hand percussion anyway that Danny's playing. If you listen, it's actually, I'm not sure exactly what the setup was, but they're definitely panning left and right. And because it's kind of rhythmic, you get this pulse that sort of moves left and right, you know, around the bass, which is dead center, right? And because it's so, like kind of polyrhythmic, it sort of gives you this real off-kilter sensation. Like you're just getting pulled in a million directions. It's almost like being in a vortex, right?
Finger, you must have been out your
Ugh.
head. I hold deep in muddy waters. You practically raised the dead. Rob the grave to snow the cradle, then burn the evidence down.
Yeah, it's definitely left and right. And then also Adam's guitars come in on both sides as well.
You must have been. You must have been. You must have been.
Nice. Ah. Adam is such an interesting guitar player because he doesn't tend to do anything conventionally. And, you know, as guitar players, a lot of us grow up listening to rock music and stuff, and you have your influences. And, I mean, he's always struck me as being kind of an out-of-the-box thinker to begin with, which is, I mean, to be in Tool, you kind of have to be. But, you know, coming from a visual arts background, creative arts kind of thing, and, you know, being very experimental visually, he just has the mind that just works outside of the status quo, right? And so his riffs are always really interesting and you know, very non-fundamental. There's sort of always kind of embellishments when they don't have to specifically be sort of, you know, adding impact or any kind of specific kind of rhythmic thing. But so the way that and the other thing is too, the more and more we get into this world of everything being emulated and digital, the less and less we're going to be hearing a lot of these old school analog guitar recording principles, right? Like I myself use a Line 6 Helix for just about everything. But the one thing you sacrifice is the ability to get, I mean, depending on how hardcore you go into emulation territory, which a lot of people reamp guitars and stuff now, is you don't get that access to play around with feedback the way that he is. And so what you have here is this beautiful part where these sort of like distortion to feedback, and how it's sort of so good. But how his parts like jung dun dun, it's like pulling the taffy. You can feel it stretching. You can almost sense like in the music video there'd be some sort of tension building in there that matches what he's adding to it, because everyone else is, it's all kind of tribal rhythms, and then he's just there pulling the taffy. He's just got this elastic band that he's stretching the tension. It's just so unconventional and so beautiful. But the feedback is everything. The way this one breaks up. Oh, I never noticed that before. The pick slide's just truncated. Like they just stop. Right? Listen back. Help me out if you're a drummer. That part there under the verse, I feel like I'm hearing the hi-hats in stereo, or it's like a shaker, like an egg shaker or something, like this, or something like that. But either way, it sounds kind of in both ears, unless it's kind of panned where a hi-hat would be, but there's maybe some sort of like a reverb on there that makes it sound wider. So I can sort of hear it, you know. And again, throughout all this, he's just letting, it's like he's playing, this is Adam again, it's like he's playing the uncontrolled elements of his guitar tone, feedback and, you know, distortion and things like that. It's like he's playing them as their own instrument. Dance round this one till you pull it out. Sounds like maybe a synth pedal or something else is going on. And that's the beauty as well. I know I'm talking a lot about Adam, but the beauty of what's going on there is that he goes from these really organic sort of natural things with these crazy harmonics and just distortions phasing out into uncontrolled wild feedback. But then when it comes into the rhythms, like the rhythmic parts, they're so tight and clean. And you can tell that he doesn't use a lot of distortion because there's so much cut in the tones. It doesn't sound like just horrible, like just, it's got an edge to it. It's got depth, it's got balls. And again, I know with guitar and bass, a lot of times when you hear a really chunky sounding guitar, 80% of that's the bass guitar working in unison, right? But when you dial back the gain a lot to the point where your amp is breaking up to the point where it's saturated, but it's not just pure noise, you get that cut and that edge and that brutality that's so counter to the rest of what's going on with these sort of more organic guitar parts. Like, wait till he comes in with this riff, right? It's just so punchy. There's that feedback again. I'll say kudos has to be like, I'm not sure, I should have done my research before this, but whoever produced this, whoever sort of did the engineering and stuff, mixing and also mastering, the drum sound. I mean, I know Danny is spectacular, and if he was playing a $10 kit from like Goodwill, he would make it sound great. But the balance here between, you know, the three main instruments, you got the guitar and the bass and the drums, and the way that they work brilliantly together is underpinned by just a remarkably good, open, punchy, detailed drum sound. Drums are kind of one of the easiest things to screw up in a mix, and I'm guilty of it. I listen to some of my old material and I'm like, ugh. For me, it's always been the hardest part to get this big, open, rounded sound. And I think it comes down to appropriate use of compression. I think people overcompress a lot of things. I tend to fall into that camp as well. I think letting the drums breathe and have headroom and detail is kind of key to getting this kind of punchiness. And then it comes down to balancing everything perfectly so that the instruments relate to each other sonically the right way, rather than relating or relying on gluing the mix by just ripping out all the headroom with a compressor, you know, because what instantly happens when you do that is everything gets louder and you go, oh, it sounds better because it's louder. But I feel like that's a false economy. I think sometimes letting the instruments have space can work more effectively. It just means you've got to be a little bit more detail oriented in your balancing and your mixing, right? And your frequency balancing and all that sort of stuff. It's kind of, I feel like over compression is like a curse, and it's one of those things that it's the easy option sometimes. And, you know, I mean, this speaks for itself. If you listen to this, how open and live these drums are. Ah. So tight, man. That's what it is. That's what I think what it is about this song that's so engaging is it's from an emotional standpoint, there's not much depth there. I want to get into this more later, but like what's great about it, obviously, Maynard, my favorite thing about Tool is when Maynard's angry about something because like hooker with a penis, things like that. There's like nobody has more attitude than an angry Maynard, right? But from an emotional standpoint, this is basically just about like, I mean, from my understanding, and it's probably wrong. I'm sure there's 100 people out there watching this right now that'll disagree with my interpretation. But to me, this is all about hypocrisy of like, the way I understand it, it's more about like lawmakers and sort of the way they're handling, you know, things like drugs, and particularly the way incarcerating people from, you know, using drugs and things like that. And so there's plenty there to be angry about and stuff. But like emotionally, like for me, a lot of times it's not really about the lyrics. It's about the feel that the music gives you dictates your emotional connection to the song. That's just me personally. That's not the way most people listen to music. But with me, a lot of times the lyrics kind of aren't the centerpiece of my connection to the song, unless there's something specifically magical about the lyrics. It's more about the way that the music grabs me and forces me to feel certain things. In the same way, when you're watching a film, you get like, you know, the soundtrack can dictate the emotional gravitas of a scene, right? But there's nothing really sort of, you know, morose or like anything about like tonally about the music. But what it does have in spades is what I was talking about earlier, is that tension. Tension building and release and just pulling it out. And what's great about that, it works perfectly in tandem with Tool using complex meters, like time signatures and things like that. Because the way I always think about things like playing in 5/8, like odd time signatures like 5, 7, 9, all that sort of stuff, is that all you're really doing is you're adding an extra beat of tension at the end of what would normally be like a pretty stable rhythm, right? So, you know, if you're thinking in 4/4, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We all heard it a million times. We can all dance to it. But if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, everybody suddenly falls over. They fall off the beat. And it's like you're expecting the 1 to come around, but you get a 5 and you're like, oh, we're pulling it away. And then bam, we're dropping you back in again. And so the way that Adam in this particular song is interpreting his take on what's happening in the song is building that tension and release by sort of pulling the taffy and then snapping it back, right? That coupled with using, you know, time signatures that create tension and drama, whether it's just throwing in an extra beat every 4 bars or something like that, you know, like a lot of people like to count things and go, oh, this is in 13 or this is in blah, blah, blah. But sometimes it can be just like, you know, 4 bars of 6/8 and a bar of 5/4, and everything's just out of control, right? However you want to sort of break down the counting, it's like it's basically just adding an extra beat of tension, and you know, and that like I said, that works perfectly hand in hand and in tandem with what I think Adam is contributing to this song, and you can hear it again here. By letting these notes ring out and just sort of bam, right? You know, just the way that the notes, the way that he's sort of like allowing that feedback to just build and build and then pop. It's like tension and release. It's like depriving you of like the resolution and then slamming it in your face, you know? And that's just like these guys in a nutshell are just brilliant at doing that. And I think it's like, that's part of the reason. To me, there's a lot of bands that try to think like Tool and they'll try to overcomplicate their rhythms to be cerebral and technical. And the thing about Tool is when you listen to them as, like I say, a layperson or someone who doesn't understand rhythms and such, I think you can tell the difference because Tool never feels like they're trying to do anything technically difficult. It always feels like it's just the process of them producing music. It doesn't ever feel like, guys, I think what we should do is do something in 13/8 or, you know, do something here or do something complicated or let's try and put all these different layers of complexity in there. It's just, you know, a couple of musicians who just get together and when they play, this is what comes out. I know that that's hard to, I'm not getting it across all that well, but you get guys who are like specifically trying to complicate things. And then you get people like Tool where their music's complex, but it's just by the nature of how they write. And it feels different. It feels like most people wouldn't even know that many Tool songs are in a complex rhythmic structure because they just feel the tension and the release and that, you know, they're hard to dance to unless you sort of just pulse on the 1, 2, 1, 2, because you're never out of time if you're counting in twos. But it's one of those things where like, I think that's the difference. I think that's why Tool stands alone. I think that's why you don't have a whole bunch of Tool clone bands, or at least none that people consider to be, if you like Tool, these guys are really Tool adjacent. It's like there's Tool and then there's these guys that kind of do the same thing, but it's not the same thing. And it comes down to, I think, it comes down to the intent. It just feels different. That's my take on it anyway. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. Because, you know, as much as I've heard people say, what's something that's Tool adjacent? I hear a lot of references people come up with. Maybe these guys, maybe these guys. They're all completely different bands. Like, there's not Tool, you don't see Tool, like, not like cover bands, but you don't see bands that are heavily influenced by Tool in the same way as you'll see, you know, like any other big rock band from any genre will have other, like, you know, when Pearl Jam came out, all of a sudden, everybody was, you know, it just sparks a whole bunch of clones. But I think that the tricky part is when other people try to do what Tool does, it doesn't end up being a Tool song. It ends up just being a complex and often beautifully executed, detailed and complex song, but it doesn't have the same flavor, if that makes sense. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe there's like 100 bands out there who would sound just like Tool. I don't think so. I'm not putting money on it because, you know, I'm a rookie as far as all this stuff goes. You know, I just like what I like, but I'm not by any means a music connoisseur. I just know what I like and I know kind of how the sausage is made most of the time. So let me know, fill me in. Let's jump back just a little bit. God, Maynard sounds so sick in this song. Come on. This is a little personal anecdote, but one of the things that I love noticing with when people do reactions to this song, you see a lot of people who they're not typically from this region of music listening and stuff, and they like things a certain way or whatever. Different people from different cultures, different everything. Everybody's reacted to this. But the confusion that comes over people's faces when they're looking at the lyrics and they're like, kangaroo, is it something about Australia? Is it something, what's this kangaroo thing? And it's like, it's kangaroo courts, right? Like that's specifically has to be what he's talking about. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like kangaroo done hung the jury with whatever it is. I can't remember the lyrics specifically, but it's about trials and court cases and incarceration and all that sort of stuff. But they're just trying to make this connection about how a kangaroo relates to this whole thing. I love it so much. Then again, kangaroo court isn't something that people throw around in conversation all that much. So I'm not judging. It just makes me laugh because I'm like, oh man, there's probably 50 times I've missed the point in this reaction alone as well. So come on. Another thing, actually, I'm listening to this, like I'm trying to fixate on different parts of the band because I've done a lot of talk about the guitars. As a guitar player, it makes sense, but there's now that I think about it, the bounciness of the bass could have like some ties to the whole kangaroo thing as well. It's like bang, 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 bang. Sorry about that. But like listening to it, I'm just getting a vibe. I'm trying to focus on Maynard, right? And I'm getting a vibe that he just tracked this from beginning to end. Because it's got that sort of flow to it that doesn't feel like a lot of times in the studio, vocalists will come in, they're like, okay, let's do the first verse. And you'll do it, and then they'll chop it, and they'll go, okay, we'll do some choruses. Do you want to do the second verse first, or you want to start working on choruses? And we'll do some double tracks and make sure that everything's nice and thick. This sounds really raw. It sounds like a live vocal almost, but just really, really well performed. And, the occasional little thing happens where there might be like, I don't know whether it's a double track or a harmony. I'll have to listen again. But he'll just double up the occasional word just to give it impact. But he's not diluting the message by having double tracks in every chorus and having heaps of harmonies and things popping out because they don't need it. And they wouldn't do it live on stage either. So I love that what you see in this recording is essentially what you get. When you go see Tool, I mean, they might have tracks and stuff doing ambient effects and all sorts of things going, but it's not like there to support the lack of ability to represent the song live, right? And again, I got nothing against tracks. If we were touring the world in my band, we'd be using them too. But I'm just saying, like, it's just the nature of music these days. I heard somebody say the other day, people always bitch about bands using backing tracks, but trust me when I say you wouldn't like the show if it wasn't for them. You know what I mean? They provide so much extra character that, you wouldn't be able to represent live with the musicians that you have available on stage. And sometimes you come up with a lot of interesting and very specific sounds in the studio as you're recording and to emulate and replicate that live, like say you're using orchestral stuff. You can't just bring an orchestra on stage on a world tour. I mean, you could, but just listen again, focus on Maynard's vocals and just see if you get the same vibe as me, that this sounds like it just a live take, but just, they probably did 5 or 6 takes and comped it or something. I don't know, but it really does like seem like it's just a impassioned single performance. Wait. Just up in ya. Yeah, he's doing a harmony there. But again, it's really held like back. They're not just throwing it on every single line for effect. It's like, he attacks that line with such vigor and verve that you need to sort of support it somehow. It's interesting too when you listen to the vocal. By any other standard of sort of pop production or rock production, it doesn't sound like a good vocal mix. And I've always thought that with Tool. I always thought it's interesting that Maynard's in the background, right? He's kind of like almost like a melodic textural device in the background. He's never right up front. In pop music, you want Taylor Swift to be the loudest thing in the mix, and you want everything around her kind of supporting and embellishing her. And I feel like Maynard is almost like he's like the backing musician to the band in a way. And I guess like, you know, I've seen him live a couple of times now, and we all know Maynard. He's always at the back of the stage. He's like, it's all about you guys at the front. I'll dance around and be my character, whatever that may be at this point. I mean, the first time I think I saw them, I can't remember which tour it was. Maybe it was 10,000 Days even. But Maynard, I think at the time he was wearing the paramilitary kind of outfit. And the entire performance he spent at the back of the stage on a drum riser next to, I think from memory, it was Danny and him were on risers at the back. And he had a lit screen behind him. So the entire show, Maynard was in silhouette and mostly from the side. And he was singing in profile, not looking at the stage, looking at the side of the stage. And that all made perfect sense to me because I'm like, okay, so Maynard is like, I'm here as window dressing for the band, and my message is strong and it's powerful, but it's like what's really important is the tribal nature of the music. The drums are what sort of sends the you know, the shaman's message across the valley. You know, the shaman's got his things to say, but really it's about the cultural kind of I can't even describe how, you know, think about how to describe it. Like there's the message with Tool, I think, is more about the tribal rhythms and the energy and the way that the rhythms make you feel and make you move. And they seem to be complex enough to open your understanding like more than just your typical sort of rock and roll fare. And Maynard's there. Like Tool could be an instrumental band, right? And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. But without Maynard, I think there'd be a massive puzzle piece missing, but that's not reflected in the mix. And even then, like if you listen to it, his vocals are kind of, they're not full sounding. They take out heaps of the bottom end because let's face it, they don't need it. There's so much bottom end in the mix already. And if they had like this low dulcet tones of Maynard down here, it would just get lost in the mix. So, and he's kind of got this yelly sort of a tone that's sort of, no, up there anyway. So it's going to sound narrow band. And then it's not loud in the mix so that it sticks out above everything else. It's pulled back. And so it makes the band sound louder, you know, like in a way that's tangible. It sounds like you're in a space. If you listen to this at the appropriate volume, you're feeling the bass and the rhythm of the music. And it sounds loud, even when you're playing it at a reasonable level. You know, because of the way it's mixed and it's recorded, it sounds like you're listening to it in a space where the band is loud. And in the background, you've got this dude screaming his lungs out to be heard, you know. And none of that is criticism. I think it's an artistic choice, and it's the right artistic choice.
Who are you to wave your finger? Who are you to wave your middle finger? Something you must have been out your mind.
Love those little triplets. Oh, never noticed that before. So it goes bum bum bada bum 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 bada bum bum. It does like I did that really badly. Bum bum bada bum 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 bada bum 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 bada bum bum. It does a triplet on every second one. It's really cool. Now I'm going to try and analyze this guitar part because he's got a wah going, and I think I think it's just feedback. He's got like a low, sort of almost like a quiet feedback. It's not shrill and out of control yet. It's just really well controlled, like he's using the amp. If you're not familiar with how feedback works on a guitar, if you have a guitar with pickups and speaker that's loud enough, the sound will resonate out of the speaker into the guitar, and it'll create a loop, which will basically feed back on itself until it gets higher and higher and squealing. Same way a mic does. If you get a microphone too close to a speaker, you'll hear it squeal. The difference is with guitar, because the way guitar amps work and guitars work, it can often sound a lot more pleasant. and have like a really cool sort of like a richness to it. But the way that it works is you have to, depending on how loud you are as well, you've got to be in a certain position adjacent to the amplifier. You'll often see guitar players run up to the back where the speaker is to really start that feedback loop. And then once you've done that, you can manipulate where you are and what you're doing with the guitar, letting the notes ring out and so on and so forth, to control what the feedback's doing. It's still always a wild animal. You can't really control it, but you can sort of like dictate, you know, whether it's going to get louder or if you can pull it back a little bit just by moving subtly and being in the right place in the environment or on stage or whatever. And so I think what's happening here is Adam is doing this solo basically through like, you know, he's got, I guess, a lot of distortion type effects on or something, and he's using feedback. And then he's also using a wah pedal to create like almost like a vocabulary for that feedback, where it's got like a, you know, like a wah pedal manipulates the signal to kind of almost sound like it's saying wah, you know, because it's sweeping the mid frequencies up and down, and you sort of get this wow, wow, wow sort of effect. So listen to this solo and see if we can figure out exactly what's going on. There's the feedback right there. He might also be using a pitch pedal as well. I'm not sure if he's controlling the feedback frequency somehow, or if he's using like a whammy pedal as well. I'm not sure. Someone will know. Let me know in the comments. This is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier with Maynard. Now, if you're still with me, I know I stop all the time, but I warned you. I warned you at the start, right? Hopefully you're getting something out of this because I'm having a ball. Perfect example of Maynard being back in the mix is this part. I also love how we go from like this sort of rolling kind of sort of thing into like a really driven but still floaty guitar part or like rhythmic part after this. It suddenly goes from being super ambient to having a specific direction. And then when Maynard sings, you can hear he's almost like muffled. It's way back here. And it doesn't seem like a main vocal. It seems, again, rhythmic and melodic, but as another instrument as opposed to like a front person. Sorry. Again, perfect example of why bands use tracks, right? Because in that part there, you've got the bass and the guitar doing that part, and then you've got a solo happening in the background. So at some point, someone's got to be playing that guitar part. And as we all know, there's only one guitar player in Tool. So there's a good chance they're using tracks there. Either that or live, they just remove Adam's part and just have the bass playing on that part, which would sound just as good. But when you play in unison with the bass and the guitar, you kind of get more of a full frequency response, more detail in the top end. Plus, he's got a delay on the guitar, which helps. Oh. Those little held notes, man. Listen to this next passage where you got these rhythms where they have like a lot of hullabaloo at the start of the bar, and then they sit on a note and hang, and then blah, blah, blah. It's almost like these little suspension bridges of rhythm that sort of, it always makes you feel like you're sort of running and then flying and then running and then flying or floating or something. It's like you feel suspended in time until the rhythm kicks back in. And it's kind of like this weird jarring effect that's kind of surreal in a way, you know? Am I reading too much into it? Sure, maybe, but there's a reason why everybody seems to like Tool, right? So he'd be playing with this hand actually, and just. Hang on, let me see what Danny's doing there. It's also much. It's trying to get it like, you know, because analytically, I've heard this song so much that I can almost play it in my head with my eyes closed when I'm going to sleep. I could just turn it on, I could hear the whole song from beginning to end, tonally and rhythmically and everything like that. But until you sit there and focus on the details, you don't realize how much you don't understand about it, you know? And I'm just trying to listen to Danny's part there, and he's got this consistent tss, 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 tss on the hi-hats, but at the same time you got this thing at the same time. And I'm fairly certain that like it's if you watch Danny do it, it wouldn't look like anything. But I'm sure that other drummers are like, oh God, it's like patting your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time, you know? This part here, right? I think. Must have missed it. So hopefully there's some dudes out there who are like more rhythmically inclined than I am, like drummers or, you know, bass players tend to be pretty analytical about rhythm as well. So you can hear like the scope of that rhythm is really sort of, it's got kind of like that sort of, like that funk vibe to it, right? But what analytically is the difference between what these guys are doing here? Because I wouldn't call this funky, right? It has elements of funk, but I'm not sure I understand the comparison between, like, say something like Earth, Wind and Fire might be funky, right? And then you get these guys. It makes you move like it's a funk groove, but would you describe it as funk? I'm not sure I would. But yeah, like if you sort of catch my drift, I'd love to know like a bit of a breakdown between what you would consider to be the differences between something that's like, you know, acid jazz funk band kind of funk and this. And does it come down to the bass guitar? Does it come down to, because the drum groove is funky as hell, but I'm not getting that flavor of funk, right? So would this go under a different descriptor, or would it be the same? Would you just say this is just funky rhythms? I'm curious, because it's like, it just occurred to me then, listening to those drums and the way I was sort of vibing with it, it makes you want to do that stank face of like some really good funk music, but it's not funk. I don't know. Help me out. Actually, that's something interesting to note too. Notice how front and center Maynard is during this part, right? And again, I wonder if it's just the way, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like this is a singular performance all the way through. And if you think about it, if Maynard was performing this, right, he's going to be sort of introspective and quiet, na 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 na, in other parts. But then this part is going to be right up on the mic and aggressive and angry, which again, it leads me to sort of feel like this wasn't a bunch of parts glued together, because they would just turn up everything else to match the intensity, right? Maybe. But yeah, there's something there. Like if you listen to how aggressive Maynard is in the mix now through this part, and also his voice sounds fuller and richer. It could be proximity to the microphone as well, because the closer you get, the more rich detail low end. It's called the proximity effect microphones tend to have. So he might be just right up on the mic, doing this now, and more aggressive vocals, but he definitely doesn't seem to have that sort of truncated frequency response that he has earlier on in the mix. And he's way louder in the mix now. Even here he's quieter, right? When does it get loud? Louder. Another great long scream from Maynard. Similar to, I think The Grudge, I think, has the one that everyone sort of harps on about. And with good reason. It's amazing. But it's it's one of those things, it's a technique like anything else. Like if you're, he sounds like he's screaming. And if you're screaming, you're going to burn through a lot of air really quickly. But if you're doing it a lot quieter, you can do it as long as you can hold any note. But if you're using proper aggressive sort of vocal technique, which I'm no expert in, but I know what I hear and when I can hear it, Maynard isn't blasting out his vocal cords, actually screaming into the microphone. It's very controlled and measured what he's doing. And that's how come he can still do it at whatever age he's at now. But, you know, like you can sort of, as long as you take a nice deep breath before you pull into something like that, you can get those long, distorted notes, and they just have an amazing effect because they just add so much attitude to it, especially when you've got so much complexity going on underneath. He's essentially just holding a single note and everything's moving under it, which is always amazing. It's a great compositional technique anyway. He's got more of a snarl going on, which is cool. I love that they don't resolve it too. That's great. But yeah, like what the interesting thing when I was pulling that out then about how like Maynard's now loud in the mix and he's up front and he's aggressive. And, you know, I alluded earlier to the fact that for me personally, an angry Maynard is a good Maynard, and they come much more angrier than like the third act of that song, right? And I really dig that. But it's also testament to how great these guys are at taking their time in allowing a piece to build from beginning to end. And you hear that a lot in Fear Inoculum, as much as, again, still waiting for that album to come to me. It's like, I like what I hear. I just think that I'm going to appreciate it more at some other point when I'm not so heavily invested in 10,000 Days in Lateralis. But there's, you know, like they start with nothing. You know, there could be just something like some little, just little sounds. And then by the end of it, it's just become this sweeping opus of just insanity, you know. But, you know, the mark of a great composer is staying your hand as much as possible to allow the song to crescendo when it needs to. And that's, you know, it's hard because a lot of times when you're writing like pretty standard rock and roll or rock metal sort of stuff, it's real easy to sort of throw the kitchen sink at the start of the song because you want to grab people's attention. It feels like if you're not somebody with the name of Tool, right, or you're even like a middle of the road well-known band, it's tough to feel like you have the audacity to make the people wait for it. That's something that I struggle with dramatically. Like I feel like if I haven't captured people's attention in the first 10 seconds, all is lost, right? Because at the end of the day, it is. I don't have the kind of pull to be able to expect anyone to sit through more than 10 seconds of a song. And so I think that's kind of one of these little magic tricks that bands like Tool pull, is and as much as they're already established, they've been doing this a long time, and they go in there with the expectation that like, it doesn't matter if anybody listens to this. We're just going to play the most amazing song we can. We're going to compose something that really speaks from the soul, from beginning to end, starting out with nothing and building to something like you've never heard before. And if 99% of the people don't make it to the point where the song gets as intense as they'd like it to be, then so be it. You know, the audience will find you. And having that cockiness and that confidence is something that doesn't come easy to artists that are starting out, right? Having the audacity to expect that people are going to be patient enough to find your true artistic soul is probably one of the biggest artistic challenges that you'll face as a songwriter. I'm struggling with it myself right now, you know, but I also look at artists like, you know, the Tools of the world and things like artists like Ren, who is an amazing independent artist out of the UK that's really blowing people's minds every single time he releases something. He's just doing what he does. He's not trying to cater to the top 40. He's not trying to do anything. In fact, sometimes he'll totally break your heart with a harrowing tale performed in the style of like a minstrel telling a story on a street corner with a guitar. And then other times he'll do like an in-your-face hip-hop sort of rap thing. But the bottom line is he has faith that the audience will find it. And that faith is paying off because his album is coming out next week or whenever it is. And it's currently the most highly pre-ordered. He's beating like Ed Sheeran. He's beating the Rolling Stones in pre-order charts. I don't know if that's in the UK or wherever it is, but either way, like that's a statement of somebody who trusts their art form and they trust that the audience will find him. And so he delivers what he wants to perform. He delivers his art in its truest form, and people are coming to the party. And that's the sort of step that, you know, I can see. I'm like listening all the way back to early Tool. They've always had this ability to just be who they want to be and do what they want to do and be as unique as they want to be, because they know and they have faith that the audience will find them. And they've found them. They found them in spades. And that's a beautiful thing to see an artist like manifest a community as rabid as Tool's fan base is, just through doing what they do. And I mean, it's not like Tool are the most fan servicey band in the world ever. You know, I mean, you know, like Maynard makes it pretty clear that he likes to keep a bit of a distance, you know, and the 7 billion people on the planet, you don't need 7 billion people to like you. You need like 0.00001% of that audience to like you. And then you've got a fan base, right? Yeah, but look, it's been a fun journey. Obviously, like I said, I know this song. I thought I knew this song. I didn't know it as intimately as I do now. And I hope you enjoyed the ride. I hope you sort of had maybe a few things pop out, or maybe you were yelling at the screen going, how is he not hearing that? You know, and for that, I apologize. But, you know, here we are. If you like this, let me know, because I'd love to sort of do some more deep dives into some songs that I particularly know. And I've always stayed away from reacting to Tool because, again, I like to be authentic and I know most of their material. So I'm not going to get on here and just court like views through simply pretending to hear something for the first time. If you feel like I brightened your day at all, feel free to buy me a coffee. I'll leave a link in the description. If not, like, share, follow, subscribe. You know, that's always really helpful. And, you know, check out the Discord if you want to chat. We got a lot of people over there who love talking music and stuff like that. Anyway, I've been on here way too long. Thanks again, guys. Thanks for being patient with me. Stay primal. I'll catch you in the next one.